A story from the book Returning, Exercises in Repentance, edited by Rabbi Jonathan Maganet. A tale is told of one who sat in study before the tzaddik Rabbi Mordechai of Nadvorna of blessed memory, and before Rosh Hashanah came to obtain permission to be dismissed. The tzaddik said to him, "Why are you hurrying?" Said he to him, "I'm a shaliach tzibor, a prayer leader, a reader. I must look into the festival prayer book and put my prayers in order." Said the tzaddik to him, "The prayer book is the same as it was last year. But it would be better for you to look into your deeds and put yourself in order." There's a number of interesting things about this story. Firstly, it's interesting that the prayers are the same every single year, because that's not how we experience prayer. One of the joys of Reform Judaism is that we reform our prayers. Sometimes we'll bring in a new machzor, sometimes we'll bring in a new reading, sometimes we'll bring in a new song. During COVID, for example, we actually added prayers written by our community, still extremely powerful prayers. And so the prayers aren't always the same, so it's not so easy for the Shaliach Tzibor. It's in fact important to develop our prayers so that they continue to be relevant for us, both in terms of timeless, ancient ways and modern ways as well. And of course, the reader here didn't have an entire series of sermons to write. And sermons are really important, a really important part, particularly of contemporary Judaism, when it comes to the high holy days and festivals, to help frame the entire experience, to help the community think about things that they may not have considered, or to bring certain things they were thinking about into their prayers in a certain way. So it's an interesting idea that the Shaliach Tzibor here, this prayer reader, is starting to panic before the high holy days. I, of course, have no idea. I'm clearly not panicking at all, even though none of my sermons are yet written. But that's why, I do know what they're about, so don't worry. That's why we have the month of Elul. The month of Elul is a month of preparation. It's a month of us preparing our souls, preparing ourselves, reflecting on ourselves, avoiding the high holy day rush. It's a month of reflection and introspection. And over the years, I've shared readings from different texts. For a number of years, I actually shared from the Machzor from the UK, the High Holy Days, Days of Awe Machzor, which has a huge selection of readings, a calendar of readings at the very start for one day in the month, for each day in the month of Elul. I've also shared from other sources as well, and have encouraged people to bring those sources in, to think about them and to read them during the month of Elul, or even over the high holy days themselves, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I thought, since the month of Elul is just starting, you might be thinking, but what do I read? What might I use to prepare? Well, here are some possibilities. The first is quite an old book. It's the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Survival Kit, with a rather glorious picture on the front. Obviously, nobody in our community feels this way during the services, and especially during my sermons. This is by Shimon Apisdorf, and it's an interesting book. It talks about how to survive synagogue, which is a really interesting way of starting off, actually. One would hope that one is doing more than surviving synagogue. One hopes that one is thriving and developing and growing. But this is from a perspective of, I don't know much, I don't necessarily enjoy this, I feel like I must be there, I should be there, how do I get through this? And the purpose of this book is to say, actually, there's some really good things here, some really important things. So it shares highlights of the Rosh Hashanah morning service, things to look out for, things that might move you. It talks about the Torah reading and the shofar service. It talks about the musaf, the additional service. What is it that is added here that you might say, oh, I actually didn't know that. That adds something for me. Then it talks about what is prayer. And before moving on to Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur, and what is Teshuvah, what is this act of returning? And so even though the tone of how to survive the temple service might be a little bit challenging, there are some gems in this book in terms of trying to help people understand the flow of the service, the major themes of the service, and how they affect us and how they can be used to illuminate the service. Another book written by S. Agnon, who actually is the author of that story I shared at the beginning, is called Days of Awe, a treasury of Jewish wisdom for reflection, repentance, and renewal on the High Holy Days. And this is a thicker book. It's more readings, I would say. It's less about how to survive the service and more about what is happening here. And one of the lovely things about this book is that it doesn't start on Rosh Hashanah. It starts at the month of Elul. It starts with this month of preparation. Then it talks about the Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah and why that's so important. And adds Selichot, which is that lovely service on the Saturday, usually on the Saturday evening immediately before Rosh Hashanah. Not always, depending on what day Rosh Hashanah falls. But again, this book talks about different themes in the service, particularly the theme of rulership, of remembrance, of shofar, and then adds a lot of readings about the themes in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Before moving on to Yom Kippur itself, the restrictions, what do they mean for us? Kol Nidre, what's with this motif of gates opening and closing? And there's a lot in this book that is, I think, really important and informative. But it's not just important and informative that we need. We also need things that move us, that challenge us, that change us. Another book is called, and you have to open up the entire book in order to see, This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared. Thanks for the reminder. This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared is written by Alan Liu. And this is about the soul. This is about us personally. This is about who we are. So it's less about the service and less about the signposts in the service and the theme of the service. It's much more about personal reflection, motivation, and change. And what's interesting is that he starts on Tisha B'Av, which we have had on that terrible day where we remember terrible things that have befallen the Jewish community over the years, and how we move from Tisha B'Av to Elul, and then going into Selichot and Rosh Hashanah. And really the focus in every single chapter is on the soul. What the soul does while the gates are still open, the soul hears its name being called on Kol Nidre, and so on. So this is a much more introspective book, as opposed to informative books, which the first two I suggested are. So if you want something that's more about yourself and developing the self, that may be this one. One of the texts that I've read, I think 2 years, maybe 3 years, is by Alden Solovey, now student rabbi Alden Solovey, called "Enter These Gates: Meditations for the Meditations for the Days of Awe." And this is poetry. Alden is a poet, and the idea is to take a poem a day and to reflect on it. So again, this is a very different kind of theme, a very different kind of way of thinking about the High Holy Days. And this is a glorious book. A number of members of our community actually brought it with them during the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur service. And when there was something in the liturgy that just didn't move them, I watched people open this book up and use it as a means of reflection and spirituality, which is extremely powerful for me. It's what my rabbi recommended to me when I was much younger, or rather kind of what I told my rabbi I would be doing when I was younger, and he gave it his blessing. The idea of, as you navigate the service, instead of saying, as this first book does, how do you survive all these prayers? Instead, Enter These Gates turns around and says, if something isn't moving you, then find something that moves you. And maybe one of these poems does just that. And so that leads me on to this year's book. I was very lucky to be able to have a soul-searching interview with Rabbi Karen Kedar, who I think is an extraordinary contemporary writer. And her latest book is called Unfolding, a High Holy Day Companion. And this is very similar in some way to Alden Solovey's work. This is personal reflections and poems that again start actually on Tisha B'Av and continue all the way through the month of Elul. So she has 7 or 8 poems for Av itself, and then a similar number, 8 or 9 actually, for the month of Elul, and then some for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur, and in between she has so many on the themes of wandering, that's wandering with an A, and wondering with an O, poems on the names of Rosh Hashanah, poems on the theme of the shofar, on the broken heart and the injured spirit. It's a very powerful book, and so this year, for our Elul readings, I'm going to be reading this. And so if you want to get a copy of that beforehand, then please feel free to order it. It's available from Reformed Judaism Publishing, which is from CCAR Press. And then during the month of Elul, I will often record or sometimes even do live a reading from this to help us prepare in that personal journey. So I invite you to prepare, to not go into the High Holy Days totally rushed. I invite you to not necessarily see this as something that needs to be survived, although, as I say, there are some gems in this book to help people who are in that mindset move to a different place. There is a lot of information about the High Holy Days. And as I say, Days of Awe by S. Agnon certainly provides a lot of information. And knowledge is really important so that we can understand what each prayer means, where it comes from, what its main themes are, how they connect to other prayers, and so on. And then preparing the soul. That's these other 3 books that I recommend. Preparing ourselves. If we are already in a place where we understand, where we're comfortable with the service, then we're really in a place to be able to prepare ourselves. And that's where Alan Lew's book, Alden Solovy's book, and Rabbi Karen Kedar's book really can be very helpful. So I encourage you to have a look at these books and read them and share your thoughts with me. I really love the month of Elul. I love having members of our community come to me and say, I'm wrestling with this, I'm thinking about this. These are the themes that I'm bringing into the High Holy Days. Do you have any thoughts of texts or anything like that? You're always welcome to come and talk to me about things like that. But if you want to read along as I read during the month of Elul, then please feel free to get yourself a copy of Unfolding, a High Holy Day Companion by Rabbi Karen Kedar, who is a lovely person to talk to and who gave a wonderful soul-searching interview. I hope that before that we have Shabbat. We have a lot actually happening. We have our Kabbalat Shabbat service. Tonight, hopefully, I'm going to be joined on the Bima by a special guest who will also be joining us at our big party tomorrow afternoon. We've got nearly 300 people coming to celebrate Temple Beth Shalom's 80th birthday. It's a really exciting time for us. We also have our Torah study in the morning, tomorrow morning, and our Shacharit service as well. We've got a lot going on. We're all preparing for the High Holy Days in many differing ways, and hopefully this will help you prepare as well. I hope to see you soon. I wish you Shabbat Shalom. And as we start the month of Elul, I hope that it is a month of growth, a month of power, a month of drawing closer to yourself, and indeed drawing closer to God. I hope to see you soon and wish you Shabbat Shalom.